So let's talk a little bit about online marketing then. What things have you mentioned that you're using the Amazon ads. What other marketing platforms are you using online to give you a boost?
I mean, so marketing wise, I mean, other than what we talked about offline, the Amazon ads are the biggest thing that I found to be successful. Years up until the last year or two, I'd been fairly successful getting some BookBub ads. I probably had 6 or 7 over the maybe a 3 or 4 year period, but then I haven't gotten any the last almost 2 years probably. And I think I've consistently heard this from folks because I do have my ebooks that are exclusive on Kindle Unlimited, and everyone I hear through forums and things is that it's rare these days to be able to get a BookBub ad unless you're wide. They just don't seem to be going the KU way, which has been my experience. So I used to find that to be a huge advantage. When I could get one of those, it would really spike the readers and it would kind of goose the algorithms in Amazon and really get a whole rush of momentum. So that was one of the early things that I did to really get some adoption. So that's kind of faded away. I probably should do some more like quarterly promotions with some of the other smaller groups out there that it's kind of on my list of things I know I should do, but I don't usually do it all the time. But the AMS, I tried Facebook ads over the years a few times, and I've heard some other people say too, it just seems to be very good at burning through your money, and I haven't found the same uptick or even measurable uptick to see that those are making a big difference. So I'm always wary of sinking too much money into something that I can't really see that's giving a return. So I think the great thing about AMS ads is that it does give you, not completely accurate with page views and things that you also are getting, but it gives you a decent read of how many orders did you get out of running these ads. So I'm doing more and more of those the past year or so, and it's hard to know exactly what would I can have a few conspiracy theories about what Amazon is doing to try to make everybody spend lots of money on ads versus just let it happen organically to try to sink more money out of the authors. But I think it seems to be having an impact. You never know what you'd be selling if you weren't running the ads, of course. But I think it's a good thing to try to keep your books top of mind, especially if you have more books. It's that many more, again, back to the entry points of the ways people can find you. It's that many more places that someone can find out about you. And I tend to most heavily promote the first book in the series to try to get people into it, and that's been positive too.
And I notice you're not currently doing perma-free. Have you experimented with that in the past with your first books?
I really have not. I know that is a tactic a lot of people use. That one of the reasons I haven't done that very much is that my first book, Summer of the Woods, has always been my biggest seller. And while I still sell many more paperbacks as a middle grade author than I do ebooks, which is I always think is the inverse of what most adult authors do. So it wouldn't affect that per se, but I've been hesitant to kind of go that route because I think it's if it wasn't selling great, that might be one thing, but I think I've just never kind of gone. So sometimes I'll move in and do some 99-cent sales to try to get people into it, but especially since it's a little bit more of an effort to kind of get it perma-free and then change it out and different things. Most of the time I keep the ebooks at $2.99. And I found that's a pretty good price point for people that want to check it out. And then my paperbacks are $9.99, so they're pretty accessible that way too.
That makes sense. And I've had some up and down varying levels of success with AMS. So since you are having success, what are maybe some tips you can share with us about how to properly use AMS?
I mean, I think everybody's kind of figuring out as they go to some extent. I've never bought some of the courses. Mark Dawson has a course that does all kinds of advertising and things. I'm sure it's great. I've kind of more the route of figuring it out myself. And it's funny because I think everybody's experience varies a little bit, which is a little disconcerting sometimes. I've read some books about Amazon ads, and sometimes the things that they're talking about are not the same things that I see when I try to do it. So I think there's some general practices, but some of it is you just have to fool with it. So what I usually try to do is, come up with a few different copy to use, and then start out with just a couple bucks a day, and see how it goes. And if you can find something that seems to be taking off, then I'll gradually move the daily amount that I'm spending on that ad, and gradually increasing it. And then I try to go through every few days. I've actually, and I'm again in the conspiracy theory, I get a little bit wondering. I've had probably better returns when I have if you're familiar with Amazon ads, the ones that automatically select where they're running. The automatic ads have generally, with mine, and it's a little confusing, as they tend to have a lower average cost of sale than the ones I'm doing manually, which is a little strange. My conspiracy theory is that because at least the way I do it, that you can't see where they're being targeted. So I wonder sometimes, are they just getting most of those clicks on your name or on the book title, which maybe someone would find anyway. So it's hard to know, but I've started doing more and more of those because either way, the cost is fairly low.
So letting Amazon just go with their automatic and letting them know best.
Automatic keywords that they just do, and at least the interface that I have, it doesn't show you what keywords they're using, but it shows you the returns. And I found mostly that those are good returns. And then I did go out. I used KDP Rocket, which is a service that you can pay for once, and it helps you kind of narrow down different keywords. So when you're doing it manually, you can help find keywords that are related to what books you're looking to sell and things maybe that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So that's a good way to kind of build a list, because I was always mystified. People are talking about they're running 400 different ads and they've got thousands of keywords, and how do you come up with these things? So the more tools that you can find to help generate some of these words, a lot of them are never going to hit, or never going to be spending any money on it. But then I go through and I look at the way I do it, and I think everybody comes up with their own system, but I look just on every few days and look, okay, the last few days and then the time that it's been running, which words are spending the most money? Because if you had 500 words, some of them are going to be spending a lot more than others. And then what is that return? And I kind of have some thresholds that I found that I said, okay, if I go X number of clicks and X number of money and no one's bought a book on that word, then I kill it. So I'm just not wasting money. Because I did read something that said, if a word hasn't started getting returns after a certain number of hits, it may never, it just may not be performing. And then I try to just keep as much as I can pull down the bids for the advertising. And this is probably in the weeds a lot more for people that haven't been doing this, but it's something you start thinking about a lot when you're spending money on it. Try to gradually pull the bids down to the point where you're spending as little as possible to still get returns that are favorable. And because a lot of my books I run on the paperbacks, which don't have the same margins as the ebooks, so I generally try to keep my average cost of sales under 30%, because I know that's, at least, especially since I'm mostly advertising the first book, I want to try to be very close to breaking even at the very least, and hopefully below that. But then you're going to have people that get into the series, you'll have more read through down the line. So I think even if I can be close to breaking even, it's still going to be a net positive for people getting in and getting money down the road.
Yeah, more readers is more readers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that makes sense. But I'm always, they just updated their whole interface a few weeks ago, so you kind of have to figure that out and see what's a method that works for you. And I think it's just testing things. I think where sometimes people make mistakes is they go and they set it for hundreds of dollars, and all of a sudden they spend all this money and they realize they didn't sell very many books. But if you start small, be patient, try it for a few weeks, see, learn the system, learn how you can make changes, see what's happening. And then gradually, as you start, and try it a few different ways, and then as you start getting some success, ratchet those up gradually, and that will keep you from kind of losing your shirt when you want to make sure that you're not, overspending, and it keeps it something that's worthwhile. And hopefully it will, just be one of those things that'll keep getting more people into your books. Not the only thing. I think if you rely on it for everything, it's probably not going to be enough, but I've found it to be useful.
And we are in the weeds, but that's okay. I want to know about those weeds. So that we can maybe help those indie authors out there that are listening to us or watching us. What is a good daily budget, you think, to start with, so that they're not losing their shirt?
I mean, I would probably start with $2 a day for an ad. That's usually the way I do it, and you have to let it run for almost maybe up to a week to see if it starts, how it's doing, and not panic if the first 2 days and it's return that seems much higher than a higher number than what you want it to be, it usually tends to settle out a little bit, or for whatever. It's very mysterious. I mean, even most things you read, nobody can quite fully understand how it does what it does. But I think giving it some time to settle out and then see how it's doing. And I think I'll start out at $2, and if something starts doing better, I'll probably won't spend more than $5 or $10 unless it starts to really have done that for a few months and seems to be performing well, and I might ramp it up a little bit like that. But I found, at least the way I'm doing it, even if you set it for $200 or something a day, unless you're making some outrageous bids where they're $2 a keyword or something, most of my bids, I try to keep them in that 20 to 30 cents range per bid, per click. So if you're doing that, chances are you're not going to be spending gads of money.
Yeah, no, I've done the $2 bids before to varying degrees of success.
Yeah, the only time I accidentally tried to put something at like 20 cents a bid and I just wasn't paying attention, and I think I put it at $200 a bid or something, and I looked and I'm like, oh, how did I spend $40 on that keyword yesterday with no sales? So yeah, you have to be careful, and you have to really watch what you're doing, because there are consequences. But it seems to be working.